Okay. Let's remind ourselves of the truly fun things in macroeconomics. And one of those is this circular flow of income, the great circle of life. Lion King is the greatest economics movie of all time. It explains everything. So the point of this diagram is that for the economy to work properly, and as the economy normally works when everything is fine, money doesn't sit around, it moves. So household saves, that money goes into the financial system, goes to businesses, businesses then buy stuff and pay, and then that goes back to the households. Households are paying their taxes, businesses are paying their taxes, and then there's transfer payments and purchases that are going back to the business and the firms. We consume at the firms pay back to the households or imports. Money is just moving and moving. All right? Now I want to take this diagram and simplify it dramatically. We're going to get rid of the rest of the world. We're going to get rid of the government and just look at the consumption savings investment part. Okay? So it looks like this. We have households and firms, and household consumption just flies into the businesses, right? You go get your sandwich, you pay for your sandwich, you take your sandwich. That money flew right from you into the firm. And then your savings is going into the financial system and hopefully coming out of the financial system, going into the firms. Okay? Then the firms, and I didn't actually put this part in there because I wanted to cut the lines down, but then the firms are going to pay the households back, right? So in theory, we should have another line that comes from here and goes out here and comes back to the firm. So the firms consume, they save, which comes back around to the firm, and then that income will flow back to the household. So let's suppose that all households consume half of their income and save half of their income, just because that's easy math, right? Half and half. So we have the household here. The households earn $1,000. They're consuming $500 and they're saving $500, right? Half of the $1,000. So the firm gets that $500. This $500 goes into the financial system, and assuming the businesses want to invest $500, out it comes into here, okay? And we have the loanable funds theory that says an interest rate should adjust and make these two things equal, which we can believe or not believe, but that's one of our versions of economic theory, okay? Well, if this is all true, households have $1,000, they consume $500, they save $500, businesses invest that $500, this $500 comes down, there's $1,000, it goes back up here, there's $1,000, there's $500 and $500. All right. Now let's suppose that the business folks wake up one morning and they say to themselves, I feel a recession coming. They don't have any reason to believe it. They don't have any data. They don't have any, right? I just feel a recession coming. Or it could be, here we were in 2020, ignore the pandemic stuff, beginning of 2020, there were already these warning signs that a recession was coming. Manufacturing employment was going down. What we call durable goods sector was going down. We had an inversion of interest rates where the long-term rates are lower than the short-term rates. We had a number debt was at an all-time high. We had these warning signs that usually are indicators that, hey, recession's coming. Okay? So either way, either they read the tea leaves, they read the signs, or they just felt in their gut that a recession's coming. Okay? Well, how do they react? Well, they're going to react if you're a business person. Remember that investment here is triggered by our view of the future, right? We look out at the future and we go, hey. So maybe instead of investing $500, they just decide to invest $400. So $500 is flowing into the financial system, but only $400 is flowing out. Now what happens? Well, we still get 500 in consumption, but only 400 is going to come around on this leg, and we're going to end up with the firm only getting 900. Now they're going to pay that 900 up here to the household. Okay? Now what's the household going to do? Well, yeah, they're going to only consume 450, and they're only going to save 450. Okay? Half and half. All right? So they're going to save 450, and they're going to consume 450. We're still investing 400. Let's assume the businesses haven't changed. They're still investing 400. Now the business is going to get 450 through consumption and 400 through investment, which means they only end up with 850. Now wait a second. So the business is cut back by 100, and so far GDP has gone down by 850. GDP has gone down by more than the initial change in investment. Now what happens? Well, 850 gets paid around up here, right? Households only get 850, and so they're going to consume 4.25. They're gonna save 4.25. The businesses are still only investing 400, and now we're down to 8.25. Okay? So this is going to keep going around and around. Again, the key point is here, the firms pay the households spend, hopefully all of that money flows back into the firm, but if it doesn't, we get into this spiral where the money's going household savings, consumption, firm, back up to the households, and every time we go around the loop, we've got less money than we had the last time. This is going to settle in at 800 if we did this all the way out, which take a long time, far too long for us to do. But I know, because I've been doing this a long time, that if we let this track all the way through, it would settle out at 800, and the final change in GDP would be twice as big as the initial change in investment. So we lost 100 in investment, and GDP is going to go down by 200. Okay? Yeah, and there's all the details about why that is, but I'm not too concerned about that, and we really kind of even skipped the chapter where we go through all that because why? But the point of this is what we call the multiplier process, right? There is a multiplier effect. Changes that happen in one part of the economy circulate through the whole economy, and we get a bigger change. Now, just a thought here. There was no recession, right? And there was nothing about to cause one until the businesses lowered their investment. So the businesses said, hey, I think a recession's coming. So they cut back on investment, and poof, 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 a recession came. And they're like, see, I'm so smart. Yeah, you caused it. Okay? Maybe you're not as smart as you think. So again, we call this multiplier effect. There are multiplier effects in the economy. And how big those are and how important they are and how we'll talk about all that because this is macro, right? And if you haven't learned yet, you should have. We all don't agree. Macroeconomics is not a subject where economists agree on things. So let's try this in a more simplistic way. Here's Bob. Bob works in a casino. Bob gets an extra $100 in income that Bob was not making before. Okay? You are friends with Bob. Got Bob? Bob. So Bob decides he's got one thing of hair on his head. Bob decides to go out and get a haircut and spend $90 on getting a fancy haircut. So Bob spends $90 to get the haircut. To Joe, who cut Bob's hair, that's not spending. That's income. Yes? If you go out and spend $90 on dinner and you tip your server $20, to you spent $20. To your server, they made $20. They earned $20. They had $20 of income. Everybody see that? So now Joe goes out. And Joe goes out and has dinner and he spends $80. To Emily, that $80 isn't spending, it's income. Bob's spending is Joe's income. Joe's spending is Emily's income. Do we see that? I hope we see that. Emily spends $70 to Ken there. That's $70 in income. Each person's spending is somebody else's income. If I go buy something on Amazon, that's my spending and Amazon's income. If I go to the grocery store and buy some peanut butter, that's my spending, that's Vaughn's income. If I pay a kid down the street to mow my lawn, that's my spending, that's that kid's income. Do we see that? So a couple things happened here. One is Bob made $100 more in income and $90 in spending. That's actually generated $240 in additional income. Do we see that? Joe got $90 in income. Emily got $80 in income. Ken got $70 in income. So these four people, Joe got an extra $100. These four people combined have $340 more of income than they had before. That's a multiplier effect. It's the multiplier. Okay? And we have terminology around that. This is what could happen. Yes? When we build the Raiders Stadium here in Vegas, how do we justify that? Well, they justify that by arguing that there are multiplier effects. That for every job that the stadium has, it's going to create 2 jobs in town or a job and a half in town. For every $1,000 that tourists bring to Las Vegas to spend at the stadium or to come here to vacation, so all the money that they spend here for their weekend, that's going to get multiplied by 2 or 3 or 4. Sometimes the convention center even uses 6 and 7. So if that stadium every Sunday that there's a game, it brings in an extra $10 million of people coming to town, right? So people usually go home on Sunday. Now they stay over to Monday. There's $10 million extra dollars of spending on every game. Well, the Convention Visitor Authority is going to argue that that $10 million every game is going to really generate 30 or 40 or 50 or $60 million in town because it's going to go from Bob to Joe to Emily to Ken to, you with me? And so we're not just better off by the $10 million, we're better off by a multiple of that $10 million. All right? And that happens 10 games a year. So if it's, if we're making $30 or $40 million a game 10 times a year, that's $400 million. Not included, right? So it's a more complex story than that. And you can come take econ classes, more advanced econ classes. We'll actually go through some of the numbers on the stadium and that kind of stuff in that class. But you see that this gets used in all parts of economics. That we say there's a multiplier effect that comes with the stadium. There's a multiplier effect when the government spends money. There's a multiplier effect here and there and everywhere. Okay? But remember the key here. And this is from the Keynesians. So there are other kinds of economists who are going to argue this multiplier doesn't exist. Keynes's theory is in large part built on this idea that multiplier effects exist. And again, we argue in macroeconomics. We don't know. We argue. Lots of people think they know, but really we argue. And interestingly enough, Keynes and some of his more intelligent followers argued about the arguing part, right? That's the good part here. The bad part isn't that you're having the argument. The bad part is that some people aren't willing to have the discussion they believe. Okay? And not that Keynes didn't believe. Keynes had a ego the size of England. Anyway, each person's spending is another person's income. In this view of the world, each person's spending is another person's income. Now, what happens if Bob loses that extra $100? Recession comes and Bob loses that $100. Joe loses 90, Emily loses 80, Ken loses 70. The whole economy just lost $340. So the multiplier works both ways. It works on the way up and it works on the way down. Is that exciting? It's very exciting. Very exciting.